Hello, welcome to Free Will, Science, and Religion. I'm Chandler Klebs, and I'm here with George Ortega and Jamie Soden, and we're going to be talking about the experience of losing our sense of free will. Because if you believed in free will most of your life, and you believe that your life is up to you and that you genuinely make choices, well then you might realize that that's not the case once you realize that causality and acausality both cancel out the idea of you being a self-causer. But then, like how it will affect your life varies a lot depending on who you are, what you're trying to do, what your experiences have been, and so it's not even your experience of losing your feeling of free will is also not up to you what you experience. So, should I start by how it affected me, or do you guys?
Sure, that sounds great. Yeah.
Right. Well, I how it started out is like I was blaming people, I was blaming I was blaming the Christians for them defending the belief in hell. I was blaming people who smoked cigarettes and drank alcohol for their addictions, like, well, they chose to do this, and so they'll have to suffer the consequences. They deserve it. And what's interesting, after I started learning that, people are really slaves to their addictions and their biology and as well as the environment that even exposed them to what they became addicted to, I started not hating them anymore. It was kind of a weird thing realizing it's still true that these things are bad, but I can't blame people for it anymore. One of the hardest parts, though, is the realizing that any concept of morality based off of responsibility, that kind of got shot down. Because a lot of things about morality is like, well, you're morally responsible, and and particularly, it's kind of hard to explain this, but it's it's about looking at things from the perspective of where morality really comes from, and about happiness is where it kind of led me. Because before, it's just like, oh, doing the right thing so that you are not held responsible and judged and blamed. I guess it's very selfish when you're believing in free will. You become so concerned with your moral responsibility that it makes you kind of crazy. Like, you want to always do the right thing. There's this immense pressure to behave morally, but for the wrong reason. If that makes any sense.
Right, because we also have to make the point, of course, that understanding that we don't have a free will doesn't eliminate our responsibility to do what's right and all. But at least we recognize that we weren't born perfect. Other people make mistakes. We make mistakes, and it just makes us so much more compassionate and understanding. I mean, yeah, it eliminates the revenge and the vengefulness and all.
And it makes us look at the causes of why things happen. And you have to ask yourself why the universe made things the way they are.
Well, yeah, Jamie, that's the big one, because I can't see any sense in that. I mean, like, I'm a pantheist, so I kind of like attribute consciousness to the universe, because, like, in other words, like, what we're saying are words and all, right? In a certain sense, it's the universe saying them. But, like, why a universe that could create such complex beings as human beings and the laws of nature? Why a universe would do things wrong, would create pain and suffering? I can't answer that. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably one of the big things, because Um, like, for example, people attribute the evil in the world to human free will often. That's how it's done. Is that, a lot of people, when they're asked, well, why is there evil in the world? Well, because of human free will. But that still doesn't answer the question, even if you grant free will, which is insane. but it doesn't truly answer the question for why there's pain in the first place, why there's suffering, and why there's natural disasters and stuff like that.
All right, so I want to go back to our original point. It's like with me, like it made a major difference because yeah, I was like into politics a lot, and I wouldn't just dislike positions, certain positions, but I'd really like dislike whole groups of people that held them, and like, and I'd see a politician come on TV or the internet, whatever, and I'd really, really, have very strong negative feelings toward them. And, so it's been several years since I've kind of moved away from that. And now I have compassion toward everyone. And like, there's still political positions that I don't agree with, but I can't logically hold the people who hold them responsible fundamentally. And so it just like, it gives me every reason, if I want to like, believe I'm a logical, reasonable person, to be understanding, to not hate them, to not dislike them, to not blame them. And that's, to me, that's a gift. It's not just a gift to them. It frees me from those negative emotions and the feelings. Yeah.
Yeah, and the important thing is that blame of people and that hating of people, it doesn't actually help. And that's what's the point about it, because if blaming people, if believing that people had a free will and blaming them and hating them actually encouraged good behavior, I wouldn't be against it. But it doesn't encourage better behavior. It just makes people go into denial. It makes them defend their positions even more, which makes us hate them more because we're blaming them for defending their immorality. So it just gets this cycle that gets worse and worse.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, you're right. It actually makes things worse because, like, without the free will belief, there's so many crimes that are committed, so many immoral acts that are committed because one person is attributing free will to the other person and says, well, like, I'm going to get them back, or they deserve, like, to be punished or hurt and something. So yeah.
Roger, yeah.
Jamie, how has, like, it affected your life so far? Like, since you've understood that we don't have a free will.
Well, I've become less prone to, blame people for, whatever they did wrong, whether it be like criminality or with, things to do with at home, my personal life. I do have arguments still sometimes, but I don't have this extreme hatred towards people anymore. Where I just say, oh, you deserve to burn in hell or stuff like that.
So, all right. So, like, I think it also applies to ourselves, right? I mean, like, we can be a lot more understanding. We all make mistakes. And sometimes, like, when we blame ourselves for it, we don't like ourselves as much, like, and that's not good because, like, we want to be happy, and liking ourselves is so important to being happy. So, to the extent we overcome free will belief, we are much more forgiving of ourselves also, much more understanding.
Mm.
Yeah, and when you step back into it, like, there's still this relief of all this guilt, not feeling like I'm to blame for everything that's gone wrong in my life. So that's still such a nice feeling that I often wonder.
Happen any other way? Is that what you're saying?
What?
It couldn't happen any other way. Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, like, I realize that the way I am, what I believe, and the opinions I have, and all my emotions, well, couldn't have been in any different way unless I had been in a different universe, unless I had been born into a different country or to different parents or taught a different religion or whatever, like, something else would have had to have been different, and whatever that different thing had happened wouldn't have been up to me anyway. So I realized that I'm either lucky or unlucky, however you look at it, but it wasn't up to me. And what's interesting about this is that even though, in a certain sense, it makes me realize I don't have, like, the power that I used to think I had. Like, I used to think, oh, I was this great, strong dude in control of my destiny, and I have the power to change the world, the power of one, the great superhero, or, like, I used to kind of think I am Link and I can defeat Ganon without the enchanted arrow. You know, like like I played way too many video games, guys. Like I thought like I will save the world.
And what people don't get is like, fine, we still do good things. You know, we can still do even great things and all. I mean, you and I and Jamie and you know, we're leading the world to a fundamentally different, new, you know, reality-based consciousness. This is major, but because we understand that we don't have a free will, we don't become arrogant, we don't become boastful, we know it's not really fundamentally up to us. So we, you know, instead of like feeling boastful or arrogant, we become grateful. You know, we're grateful. We feel lucky that the universe chose us to do this.
Yeah, it's different because you're still doing amazing things in your life, but it's kind of a different feeling because it's almost like, well, yeah, you're doing something, but nonetheless, it's not up to you. It's sort of like, for example, like a person might think that they're great because they, they can write a computer program that can find all the prime numbers less than 10,000 or whatever. They might think, hey, cool, I wrote this program that found the prime numbers. But, you're realizing you're going by a system designed to find a sequence of numbers that has a definition. Like you're not the self creator of anything. You did not invent the colors or the shapes or the sounds. Like it's like you might be a composer of music, but you did not invent sound. You did not invent hearing. And it's like nobody has a copyright on anything.
That's a good point. Another example is like, you know, I mean, nowadays, like beauty contests for women, you know, nowadays they have to like perform an instrument or dance or sing, whatever. But I think, you know, some contests are just like on how attractive the woman is. And like, I mean, everybody knows that we don't get to choose how, you know, how we look and all, how tall we are, you know, our physiology and stuff. But these women, you know, still feel good about it and we still celebrate it. You know, it's like it's not like we're not going to celebrate our achievements and not feel good about them. You know, even if they're not up to us.
Yeah. And you know what's another thing that's interesting is you mentioned the beauty contests. Well, like there was this movie I saw. It was called Little Miss Sunshine. And there was this guy in that movie who came to the conclusion that life is just one big beauty contest. You know, like it was kind of funny. Like people just, it's kind of silly. People are just, judging people based on the way they are, the way they look, or something like that, you know. And what was really sad, and I know it's kind of a tangent, but that guy, he wanted to be a pilot, a jet pilot or something, but then one day he discovers that he's colorblind, and for whatever reason, that means he can't do it, and so he's all upset about that. But that's an example of how something that was totally out of his control prevented him from one of his dreams. It was just sad.
So yeah, right. So like the other part of this is like, so there are so many benefits, you know, to understanding that we don't have a free will. But again, as we've discovered, it's one thing to know it intellectually, you know, logically that nothing is up to us, and it's sometimes we find that it's harder. It's another challenge that sometimes will maybe take years to really, you know, be able to integrate that deeply enough into ourselves so that we're acting on it moment to moment, you know, day to day.
Yeah. Um, and it's kind of difficult to know exactly, like, is there even a system by which you can check yourself just to know, like, am I being consistent?
Well, I know, yeah, no, I know, like, for example, let's say, what happens, like, yeah, let's say I don't watch TV or news too much, but if I hear somebody say something that I dislike, I have to catch myself. My first reaction to is like to direct my anger toward the person. Then I say to myself, wait a minute, this person doesn't have a free will. So like it hasn't become automatic yet, but you know, I guess maybe the system in terms is just how if we're blaming others, if we're directing our anger toward them or even toward ourselves, a lot of times we do something wrong and we feel guilty and we punish ourselves. That can tell us, and I think we can get better and better at catching ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, because sometimes there's those moments where somebody will say something that's just so ridiculous and so stupid, and then I'm thinking, well, how could they say that? That's so stupid. I assume that they know better, but then I realize they don't. I mean, that was kind of how I felt about the 5 minute Grand Canyon guy. Did we tell you about that?
Yeah,
Now, what's that about?
Oh yeah, there was this guy who was claiming that the Grand Canyon formed in about 5 minutes during the flood of Noah in the book of Genesis. Oh.
Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, well, but I was thinking, well, then why is the Grand Canyon in that spot if it was a global flood?
Good point.
But I just realized I can't blame these people for, whatever strange beliefs that they've either been taught or that their subconscious brain puts together somehow. I don't know how that works, but people say a lot of crazy things. People do and say and believe a lot of crazy things, and we realize we can't blame them. And when we look at our own lives, like we'll see that we have crazy beliefs too. We do things that don't make any sense at all. Like here's a fine example, a real life example of something really stupid I did, guys.
yeah, because if you believe in free will, then you're basically believing that someone can override the laws of the universe, right, George?
Right, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
since that's an example of an insane belief right there. But I was arguing with this YouTube user called Debunking when I Chandler.
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
Chandler, finish? Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, okay, that day when my mom got hurt, and fell on the floor. Well, so I go in my room and I ask my mom the dumbest question. I'm like, "Are you hurt?" And like, of course she was hurt, But that wasn't the question I meant to ask. It was more like, how badly are you hurt? Where are you hurt? Like how much of an emergency is this? Like, but it wasn't like, are you hurt? Like, well, duh, she's hurt. That's why she was crying after she hit the floor.
Uh,
But that's just an example of something dumb that I say, and I say dumb things.
and so a lot of it is like it's not even that we're being dumb. It's like the English language, the language in general, is not so very precise sometimes. Like our language is not perfect. So like sometimes our words are misconstrued, or sometimes again this is another thing of free will. If we had a free will, we would form the words exactly how we wanted to say them. So even so when we say something that comes out dumb or whatever, it's not even it just happens.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that, like human languages are a big barrier because we're using words right now because that's what we have to do, obviously. We're speaking and we have to use English. But words don't truly get the point across. I mean, for example, somebody can say to you, soccer ball. But if you've never seen a soccer ball, the words have no meaning in of themselves. Somebody has to show you a soccer ball, before you can associate those words with that object.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Joe. And that's our whole mind works like that. That's another reason we don't have free will. I mean, we don't like give ourselves those early associations. Like if we read a book or something, we have no idea what we're going to be reading until we read it. And once we read it, it's already influenced. It's in our memory, and it's already influencing what we'll think next.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that is that when you're first reading any book, like, well, you don't know what most of the words mean. Like it's kind of strange. You don't like I've read a lot of books without knowing what, half of the words in them actually were. And you can't always just stop and look every word up in a dictionary. Like, and so you end up reading a book, and then later on you understand it better after your vocabulary understanding has increased. So, I mean, Dr. Seuss books, I had to reread them and then learn what they were actually meaning.
Absolutely. So I think another effect of this free will, refuting free will, understanding that we don't have it, is that, in a certain sense, it makes reality much more amazing. I guess it's amazing because been conditioned to believe in free will, but like it seems so amazing that our world is like a movie, that everything is destined, everything is fated. I mean, that's such an amazing thing to come to realize.
Yeah. And some people, they might misunderstand it. Like because there is the confusion between determinism and fatalism. Um, but it's weird because what they don't seem to get is, even though there's not actually a script that we can read and have access to, or anybody else that can actually predict it, it's still just by the laws of motion and cause and effect. This person at a certain time will say something which will cause this person's subconscious to react in a way, and they'll say something. And so, yeah, everything is predetermined, but we just don't know.
It just makes reality so surreal, so real. No, no, yeah, no, to Chandler. Sorry.
Yeah. But yeah, it is amazing because life is basically the biggest movie ever. And yet you don't have to have a Blu-ray player.
And what's cool about this, guys, is like, with evolution, you have to know some science to get it. With a lot of our truths in the world, like, for example, the world is an orb, you got to know some, like, astronomy or some geography, whatever. But with this, like, overcoming this notion of free will, it's something that all you have to do is apply some basic logic, so it's accessible to everyone.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. Um, and like I mentioned before, when people are blaming people, sometimes they'll say, "Well, I wouldn't have done this if you hadn't done that." By doing that, they're admitting that that person caused them to do what they did, and so you're acknowledging a cause and effect there. It's interesting.
That's a perfect example, absolutely.
Yeah.
So people would just stop being blamed for being evil and stupid then.
So then there's this other kind of, like, some people will say, that, like, this doesn't matter. Or they'll say, like, if everybody got that nobody has a free will, all of a sudden life would like lose its meaning. But one thing I remind people, like, for example, like, I think in terms of like what we value as human beings, love is really up there. Like loving other people, falling in love, whatever. I mean, like, people really value that, and people understand that that's not really up to us. In other words, like, if a couple of people fall in love and they get married, whatever, that's not up to them. You can't decide to do that. You can't, so, like, basically the point is, like, fine, nothing is up to us, nothing's up to anybody, but life still is filled with meaning. We still can be very, very happy.
Yeah, and it's sort of whatever meaning develops out of the circumstances, in a way, is how I kind of look at it. Because I I guess my like, I never attached meaning to being in control of life that much. I mean, it's not like I ever really felt like I was in that much control. You know, especially, when like you grow up, in poverty, and you don't, and you have certain limitations, and you're not able to do certain things that you want to do. You become aware of how much is outside of your control. So how I found my meaning was always in other things. It was in appreciating the beauty of art or humor or nature or something. So there's all sorts of meaning in life that don't depend on belief in free will.
Yeah, I think you intuitively got that we're not in control of things, and that's probably one of the a big problem in our world. People like this sense of control. They like to control other people, and to the extent everybody realizes nobody's really fundamentally in control of anything or anyone. I think that would make people a lot more kinder and understanding.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thought because people's need to be in control often leads them to use, politics or some other threat of violence to control people in a way and make them do what they want. And so this gives like those people a sense that they're in control of these other people. But here's the deal. Who's in control of them while they're controlling those other people? And they're going to realize that they're not even in control of themselves if they truly understand that they are a slave to their desire to be in control.
And what about
That's
climate
great.
change and the year 2100, George?
Well, I mean, in terms of like the importance of the world getting that we don't have a free will, yeah. I mean, we've done episodes on this. Basically, people deny things in their life that they are feel guilty for. If somebody accuses somebody else of doing something, and what they're accusing them of is so horrific, so people will say, no, I didn't do it, or it didn't happen at all. So people everybody believes in free will. So the scientists are telling people, listen, we are doing, we're wreaking havoc on the climate. We're responsible for climate change. And they tell them, like, if by 2100 we don't do enough by then, civilization as we know it may cease to exist. People can't deal with that. So they go into denial that climate change is happening because of this belief in free will. So, like, to address that, some people say it doesn't matter whether we know it or not. It matters profoundly, and it matters, to the future of our world.
Yeah. And here's what's kind of scary about it, George, is like like I am sort of thinking that we're not really going to be able to reduce climate change because they're not changing that fast.
Well, Chandler, I have to agree with you. And so, like, it may come to, like, when things get much more difficult, then the free will refutation becomes a gift, because, like, at that point, if people still believe in free will, everybody's going to be blaming everyone else for what happened, for what's happening. Whereas, like, if by then everybody understands that nobody's a free will, fine, at least we can address the challenges that will face us, without this blame that that'll distract us from doing what we can do, to at least protect ourselves from the harm that it'll cause.
Yeah, it's
So
still better, even though we may not be able to prevent the biggest tragedy of all time. I mean, we still will no longer feel guilty for it, and that's such a big benefit.
Oh yeah.
there's also this problem where people are more for retribution and rehabilitation when it comes to the justice system. I mean, it's hard to get the death penalty abolished in America when there's so many people who support it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what's very, very interesting, guys, is um apparently, like, yeah, there's a lot of people who are for the death penalty, and it's really kind of a strange thing. I mean, that's a whole another topic for another podcast, I guess, that whole big thing. But the reasoning behind it really comes down to something. Do you believe people can change? Because if you believe people can change and be rehabilitated and reformed to where they're safe again, they're no longer a threat, well then it makes sense to do that. But if you believe that people can't change and that, once a criminal, always a criminal, if that's what you believe, then the death penalty makes sense under that light. So under that reasoning that people can't improve, it makes
That's
sense.
excellent point. Excellent point. So no, just to be fairer and more humane toward each other, we need to overcome this belief.
Yeah. And we know that people do change. It happens all the time.
All
Yeah.
right, so I guess we're at around 30 minutes, or
Yeah, we're a little over 31, but I can cut out some extra stuff if I
oh,
have.
you don't have to. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, we're not being too strict about that, are we, necessarily?
No, no.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but I guess we could end this episode. We've talked a lot about how our views have changed over time as we've come to understand that we don't have a free will and it's not up to us. We've become more compassionate and less blaming of others. So I guess that's it for this episode, and I hope you've enjoyed.